Days turned into weeks, and the town of Redwater Pass slowly stirred awake from the long slumber of abandonment. Lena's voice brought warmth where there had only been wind before. Clay noticed that even the horses seemed calmer when she was near, their ears flicking toward her, humming as though they too sought comfort in the sound. He found himself smiling without reason, catching sight of her placing flowers in the windowsill or brushing dust from her dress. Simple gestures that made the world feel whole again, yet healing was never a straight path. Lena still woke some nights with shaking hands, swallowing back memories she wished she could forget. Clay would hear her quiet sobs through the wall and sit up in bed, torn between giving her space and rushing to her side. One night she called out, a single strangled gas pan that was enough. He knocked gently and she opened the door before he could speak. Her eyes were wild with panic, but the moment she saw him, her breath slowed. He guided her to sit, offering silent company until her tears dried. Neither said much, but the unspoken message between them was stronger than any vow. You're not alone anymore. Word traveled slowly through the West, but news always found a way. Collister's death did not go unnoticed. Whispers began to spread in nearby towns about a sheriff who stood up to a wealthy tyrant and shot him dead in the dust. Some called Clay a hero. Others, a fool who would soon face a reckoning. Clay didn't care much for rumors, but Lena noticed the tension in his shoulders each time riders approached the horizon. He was always ready, now too ready. He would step outside to rest his hand on the revolver at his hip and wait for strangers to declare their intentions. Sometimes they were only drifters seeking shelter or water. He would offer what he could. But other times, eyes lingered too long and hands twitched to near holsters. And Lena understood why Clay hardly slept. One afternoon, as Lena gathered laundry from the line, Clay approached with an uneasy look. A letter had arrived, carried by a ranch hand passing through. Its seal was fancy, the kind bankers used when money was involved. Clay read it with a grim expression, then folded it slowly, as though trying not to crush the paper. He told her Collister had a brother, a powerful railroad man named Vernon Collister, who demanded justice and compensation for the loss of an asset. The message promised men would come to collect Lena, or the equivalent in blood. Lena felt the ground tilt beneath her. All the terror she thought she had outrun came clawing its way back into her chest. But Clay reached for her hand and squeezed it firmly. "Listen," he said, voice rough but steady. "I don't care if 10 or 100 Collisters come. This is your home now. You won't spend another minute in chains." His eyes burned hot with defiance, protective, unyielding. And for the first time since she fled Silver Creek, Lena believed she could face the monsters from her past. The next few days were spent preparing not for running, but for staying. Clay fixed the shutters on every building that still stood. He set up barriers at the north and south entrance to town. Lena learned to shoot, though she hated the weight of the gun in her hands. She practiced anyway. Clay taught her how to aim, how to breathe, how to hold her ground without trembling. After long sessions, they'd sit on the porch with lemonade or coffee, sharing quiet smiles that told each other everything would someday be okay. Tension came slowly, like a brewing storm. The night before everything changed, Lena sat beside Clay beneath a sky scattered thick with stars. She told him about her dreams, about wanting to build something lasting. Maybe a small inn or a place travelers could rest and hear music that made their burdens lighter. Clay listened as if each word were a gift. Then he spoke, voice low. "If you build it, I'll help. I'll hammer every board myself." Lena felt warmth flood her chest, more powerful than fear. She leaned her head against his shoulder and whispered, "Thank you." Clay didn't move for a long time, afraid any motion might break the moment, until finally he allowed himself to rest his cheek lightly against her hair. Dawn arrived on a tide of danger. The thunder of hooves rolled across the valley, shaking windows and sending birds scattering into the sky. Lena froze by the stove, spoon in hand. Clay stepped onto the porch, rifle in arm. A dozen riders approached, armed, cruel-faced men with black vests embroidered with Vernon Collister's seal. At the front rode a man with a silver-tipped hat and dead, shark-like eyes. He reined in his horse, sneering down from the saddle. "We're here for the girl," he announced. "Hand her over and maybe we'll leave your bones unbroken." Clay raised his rifle, the barrel steady as an oath. "You can ride back and tell Vernon he lost his claim the moment she set foot in this town." The man's snarl twisted. "Wrong answer." Gunfire cracked through the air like dry lightning. Lena ducked behind a table, heart slamming painfully against her ribs. Clay returned fire with lethal accuracy, dropping one rider clean off his horse. The battle exploded through Redwater bullets shredding wood, glass bursting into dust clouds. Lena scrambled to the locked cabinet and grabbed her pistol, every part of her shaking. But she remembered his lessons: breathe, aim, stand, and peered through the broken window, firing at a rider taking aim at Clay's back. Her shot struck the man's shoulder, sending him spinning from the saddle. Clay looked over, relief and pride shining in his eyes for one heartbeat before he ducked behind a water barrel. The fighting raged, smoke thick in the air. Horses shrieked. Men screamed. The West showed its teeth. Minutes felt like hours, but one by one, the attackers fell or retreated. Those who could still ride fled in panic, tearing away across the plains. The one with the silver-tipped hat lay sprawled in the street, clutching his chest, gasping hateful curses before falling silent for good. The dust settled, and with it came the echo of quiet so loud Lena could hear her own pulse. Clay staggered toward her, limping slightly. A graze across his arm bled red through his shirt, but he waved off her panic as she ran to him. "Just a scrape," he said. But when she threw her arms around him, he held her tighter than he ever had before. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of gunpowder and sweat and safety. When the adrenaline faded, Clay sat heavily on the steps, his breath slower, his eyes far away. Lena knelt beside him, bandaging the wound as gently as she could. "This isn't over," Clay murmured. "Vernon Collister won't stop until he sees this town burnt and us with it." Lena finished tying the cloth and met his gaze without fear. "Then let's rebuild faster than he can destroy. Let's give this place a reason to stand tall." Clay watched her with awe, his weathered heart softening at the courage of a woman who once trembled at shadows. He couldn't help reaching up to brush a stray lock of hair from her cheek. "You've changed this town," he whispered. "You've changed me." The days that followed were filled with rebuilding and planning. Travelers who heard of the fight came offering supplies and help, drawn not by gold, but by the promise of community. A new saloon was built, one where Lena sang not for fear, but for love of music. Clay deputized 2 ranchers who knew their way around a gun, ensuring Redwater would never be defenseless again. At night, lanterns glowed in windows that had been dark for years, and the laughter of folks sitting outside by the fire slowly replaced the haunting silence of abandonment. One evening, Lena stood in the doorway of the sheriff's office wearing a fresh dress she had sewn herself, soft blue linen that matched the twilight sky. Clay looked up from his desk and paused, struck by a warmth he couldn't contain. She smiled, shy at first, but brighter as he stepped closer. "You once told me I didn't need to undress for you," she said quietly. "And you gave me back more than freedom, you gave me dignity." Her eyes glistened with emotion too deep for fear now. "So if I shed anything from this day forward, it'll be the weight of the past, piece by piece." Clay reached for her hand with a tenderness, born of years of grief melting into hope. "Then I'll help you carry whatever remains," he said. She rested her forehead against his, and together, they breathed, no longer defined by what they'd lost, but by everything they were building together. Children would someday play in the streets of Redwater Pass. Travelers would tell stories of the sheriff and the singer who turned a dying ghost town into a place worth calling home. And legends would spread about the day a frightened woman asked where she should undress, only to find a man who offered her not a room, but a future. The West remembered its share of blood and dust, but sometimes in places nearly forgotten by the world, love rose stronger than fear. That was the legacy Clay Archer and Lena Whitlock began the day he promised she would never again belong to anyone but herself. Redwater Pass stood living proof that even in the harshest lands, hearts could heal. And the 2 souls who found each other amid ruin learned the bravest thing a person could ever do was not fight, but stay.